All right, so now we're going to make our feet. And this is going to be a simple foot. It's going to be flush, but it's going to be a wraparound. And we need to make a couple of cuts in here. We want to know where the front part of the foot is, where the side is, and this is going to be the cut corner. So this I'm measuring here at about 1 3/8. I want this to actually, the foot to actually stick out a little bit beyond what we need, have a little extra that we can cut off. So we got 1 3/8 here. We want the foot in the front of the pot to be a little bit longer than the side of the pot. So we got both marks, and we're going to make 2 little wedge cuts. And then we're going to pull these together, kind of compress that. Remember, we're working with wet slabs, which rebond very easily. Gonna lay it up on here to see if we're gonna fit right. Yeah, see, that's not good. Let's kind of rejoin that. You'll see how this gets compressed a little bit later. Okay, now we just got to make 3 more. I can't remember what that was. Okay, yeah, that's it. Seems like a lot. 2 5/8, 3/8. That's about right. I have a short-term memory problem.
Wedge a little bit bigger. These things are sitting out. It's gonna be too much water. So actually we want the total of those 2 cuts to add up to 90. This will make it a 90-degree turn around the foot.
So now that we got all of the cuts made and put together, we want to actually make these all fairly even thickness. They're close, but we also want to help compress that joint. So what I'm going to do is take and line these all up. Fold the piece of paper over so it doesn't stick. Then we're going to use another piece of masonite and just kind of use body weight, kind of even out any thickness issues that we have. Paper keeps it from sticking. You can see now that they're much more homogeneous and they're ready to go on. So now that we got the feet made. I've slipped or scored. Now I'm going to slip. The clay has dried out since we've started this stuff, so slip is a bit more important at this stage. And we kind of want to get a little bit of it to ooze out of the joints just to make sure that we have a full contact. Yeah, I'll put a little bit on here as well. We're going to do a little bit of an overhang, standing proud of the side, and that'll get trimmed off when we flip this over. But the big thing is just kind of slide them around a little bit. See, we can do this kind of pushing because the plug is still in it. And once we trim off that excess, those joints that are in the feet will get compressed even more. And ready to go. So now we've got them placed. We want to make sure that all of those feet are about the same thickness. Once again, I'm going to take a bat, lay it on top, and kind of compress that to make sure that everything is all even and ready to go. So now we got the feet on, we're going to make some spacers that are going to support the bottom as this thing dries, and actually they'll be used later on to support the bottom when it's being fired. Now, all that compression of the feet, these are made out of the same slab, but all that compression has actually made the feet a little bit thinner than what these are. And you can tell that by laying a straight edge on, and you can see that that has got to be a little bit thinner. So I'm going back to the slab roller and reduce these by maybe a 1/16 of an inch. Okay, so now that I've rolled these out again, we can see that that is a nice fit. Everything fits from corner to corner. So now, in order to keep them from sticking, I'm going to put some butcher paper in between each of the spacer. Little razor knife and cut. I like to put one between each foot. And two in the middle. Okay, so now we're going to let this set up. We actually want the pot to shrink down onto the form a little better than it is now. Everybody's studio is different as far as the temperature and how much drying. I have about a 6-hour window that I can work the slab over the pot and then still get the plug out without a lot of problems. You can let this sit too long and the plug won't come out. or you'll deform the pot pulling it out. So keep your eye on it and don't let it go too far. If you you don't want the sides, if you take it out too early, the sides could sag on you, which isn't a good thing either. But it's definitely better to err on the side of not long enough than too long. Okay, well, the pot has sat probably for about 2 hours since we put the feet on it, and the slip that we used has firmed up, and it's time that we can flip this thing over and trim the excess off of those feet. So what I'm going to do is use some newspaper again. I'm going to use a bat, set it on here, and flip it. And get the drill, pull the screws. This is a chance to see how well we did with not pulling the rib up too quickly, and see how evenly formed the top of the rim is. You can see some places I'm missing some clay, and that can be filled in tomorrow when we clean the inside of it up. But for now, our objective is to trim the feet off and make them flush. So what I'm going to do, I have a little carving tool here that I'm going to take and use to get a lot of this excess off. I'd use a fettling knife, but I would probably nick the rim, which is why I'm using this tool here. We want to eliminate as much scraping as we can, because this goes a little bit faster than a scraper does. And we're just going to go right around.
This isn't going to be a very fancy foot. It's just going to be flush with the outside of the pot.
So now that we have this flipped over, I've trimmed off the excess newspaper with an X-Acto knife so that it doesn't get in the way of scraping with this rib. Now this rib has the angle of the side of the pot carved on it so that it mimics the rest of that angle. And I'm simply going to start using it and scraping that excess clay off. Now, when you get to the end, you want to reverse direction so you don't tear out the bottom of the foot, and go this way.
I think, I'm not sure if we need to put some extra light on this so you can see. I don't think so.
One nice thing about doing the feet, while they're the same moisture content as the rest of the pot, that this joint will become completely invisible, as opposed to them shrinking away from one another. If one was leather hard when you put it on and the other was not. Okay, so we have the foot all trimmed. The sides are ready to go. So what we need to do is get the plug out before it gets too tight. And I found that going corner to corner is a little easier than going at the two ends. So you can see I'm doing a little bit at a time. And you can see it's starting to give way. You want to get it loose. And a little shake, and up we go. So now you see the butcher paper on the inside here. And I'm going to take a fettling knife, get started under the butcher paper. And that's what's nice about the butcher paper as opposed to the newspaper, is this is pretty much going to come out in one piece. Newspaper wouldn't do this. Okay, so you can see some of the places where the overlaps in the butcher paper was, but for the most part we have a pretty clean interior. But we really don't want to try to smooth any of this out until the sides have a chance to firm up overnight. So what I'm going to do is I have saran wrap, long pieces, and I'm going to cover just the outside of the pot. Now, you may not have to do this. I've found that this works for my environment. If I covered the whole thing, it wouldn't dry at all. But if I left it out without this, it would be too dry. So this is my way of letting it get half dry enough. And the wet clay kind of sticks to the saran wrap pretty well.
And finish going around here.
Okay, so we're going to let this sit overnight, come in, clean up the insides, and by then the bottom will be firm enough that we can put a smaller plug inside of this to flip it over and work on the bottom. Trim the feet as well as clean up any other things that need to be cleaned. So that's it.
See you tomorrow.
Bye. So now that this pot has sat overnight and kind of firmed up, we can take the plastic off and reveal what we have. You can see that, you know, the walls are pretty firm here, you know, and that what we're going to do now is try to clean up the inside. This is a pretty clean pot for wrinkles and everything, but it's still kind of worth taking these little fold marks and getting them out with a rib. Some places, sometimes you can have bigger divots from that, where you would actually maybe take a finger full of clay and kind of drop it in there to feather it out. But you can use different tools to work these corners. Let's see. Here's one that it's a little, I think it's urethane, a soft comes in. It's good for smoothing out tight little corners. Yeah, I guess this probably means a little bit more if you were doing an unglazed pot. Glazes cover up a myriad of boo-boos. And since this is the inside of the pot as well, you're really not going to see it. If this was a suibon that was going to be glazed, I would probably spend a little bit more time making sure that it was well done. So one of the other things that I can show you is that I have a different rib here that actually is set up to do different radiuses of the corner. Here we have a really sharp corner, which is not very durable. So in order to smooth that out or round it off in a consistent way, I'm going to take it and dip that in some water to lube it up. And you can just take it and pull that clay off of there. So it's taking the clay off the side of the pot and the top of the pot at the same time, so you don't have to work a burr back and forth. And you can take that and just keep going around. Now, a lot of people ask about, do you put a fillet in the corner, little worm? And I have done it both ways. I've put it in and not. This one is pretty clean, which I could probably get away without one, but I'm gonna put one in just to show you how I do it, and probably make me feel a little bit better anyways. So let me roll out some worms. So now I got a worm that's kind of rolled out, and since this pot is kind of dry, I'm going to take and wet that worm down and get it moist, and that will help the pot just kind of suck this into place. Let's hope it just stays together. You can see the thick and thin parts that I'm kind of pushing on down the way here. See, it's broken. And then we're going to take this, kind of smear it in there. And then I kind of use the back of my nail as a rib. Which seems to just have about the right radius on it.
There's no dialogue, there's really nothing to watch. Monologue, I should say.
Okay, now that we got our little, most of everything filled and the little worm in the bottom, I'm going to go and do a general cleanup with this smoothing sponge. This is like the white sponge, and it's pretty dense, and you wet it, and it can kind of smooth out a lot of little lines that might be left over from the rib, and help to round the corners off so they're not quite so fragile to chip. And I've even found some of these little tools here very useful for smoothing out corners and radiuses. This will push grog back down into the clay body, where a sponge can actually bring it up and create lines. But so now that that's pretty much taken care of, we're going to flip this thing over and work on the feet for the final product. So now that we have the inside finished, we're going to flip it over. And in order to do so, we have to support the bottom of the pot so that it doesn't distort. So what I've done, there's just a bunch of scraps that are laying around the shop, and it kind of fits the inside pretty closely. And it really doesn't have to fit perfectly. The original plug won't fit in here anymore because the clay has shrunk so much that it won't fit in at all. So we have the support, put a bat on it, and flip it over. And we have the pot and the supports. And so these supports, actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut them in half. They don't have to be nearly as big anymore, and they are big enough now that it's actually going to slow down the drying process. So these will come off, and I'll essentially just cut them in half. When we flip this back over, you know, we'll put them back in place. But for now, really what we have to do is address this giant foot. And in order to do that, I have a common trim tool here that is a circle. And I'm just going to go in, and I want the foot to be about a ½ inch wide. And I'm just going to kind of eyeball it as I go around. We can come back and trim it up a little closer if we get too far out of whack. And it's better to be a little bit shy than too much. So now that that's trimmed, we want to take and trim, you know, this is just a style of foot that I tend to use, where, you know, I just take and angle this hard edge up to the bottom of the pot. So I'm going to come in about a ½ inch, 5/8, and just trim that down at an angle. Do the same over here. And then use a rib to kind of smooth that whole thing out. This is soft rib, and it's nice to keep it clean and moist. And we're going to take this and kind of run it around this edge. Take the excess off. this little corner up. And now we're going to use our little radius tool, little rib to go around the outside edge. Take that hard corner off of there that would chip easily. Now you can do this in a couple of passes. You know, you're better off doing it in a couple of passes as opposed to trying to take it all off at once. You can see there's still some little burrs left on there. And so we can take that same tool and clean up this bottom edge of the pot and get that burr off of there as well. And you can use use your finger, use a smoothing tool, whatever works to get that clean. And just work yourself around the whole pot. Okay. Let's flip it over. And then we can do the beauty shot. So now we have the finished pot. All that's really left to do is drill the drain holes in it. Now I won't put that in for a few more days for the pot to get much more firm, and what I use to put the holes in is a hole saw. You can buy these in different sizes, and I'll drill halfway through from one side, flip the pot over, and drill the other half, which leaves a very clean, consistent hole. Some people may like to do that other ways. That's the way that I do it. But I will say that it's sitting on newspaper. So as this pot continues to shrink, the paper will shrink with it, and it'll slide across the bat much more easily than if it was sitting directly on it. It wouldn't stick. So there we have it.
How are you going to dry it? Covered, uncovered?
Oh, right.
Temperatures?
Yes. Well, yes. I dry them very slowly. And it's covered up for most of the time. I'll bring it out for a couple hours a day and cover it back up again. So as it dries, that time will keep increasing to maybe 4 or 5 hours. The bigger the pot, the slower you dry it. Smaller the pot, the faster you can dry it. This has a good bit of grog in it, so that it'll be able to go pretty fast. So here's it. We are at the drying rack. These are covered up. These are in different stages of drying. And these have all been made with a similar method, but some are modified, others aren't. Coming out to dry for a little, but here it gives you an idea of this was a plug for this pot and these other two. It has been modified from, this was the first one. The side has been cut off to modify it a little bit to give a little curvature to the wall. And then the ribs change. So it's a easy thing to do, but you can see how one plug can make multiple pots with different ribs. Versatile. I think I think that's what we want to say. Bye.